Thank you for staying with us for the film discussion. We apologize for the shortcoming. We would like to invite the filmmaker to the stage. Please receive him with applause.
Oh, I thought he was going to moderate. That's for all this organization. First, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for our filmmaker for blessing us with his work. I just want to say, in about maybe a month or 2 or 3 or 4 months, you wouldn't be suffering like this, blocking each other and not watching the subtitle. We are expanding next door, and we're working hard on it. A better seating arrangement that the filmmakers would deserve. And again, thank you for blessing us with your work, my brother. And what I'll do is initially let him express, introduce. He should have introduced the film, and maybe Abel is disorganizing it, I don't know. But I will, during the question and answer, I'll facilitate. But can you give our audience a little bit of the background of the making of this film?
Sure. Thank you again so much for the opportunity and for the audience. Just the background, I think I mentioned to you, Uncle Haley was a mentor to me many years ago at the African Film Workshop in Luxor Film Festival in Egypt. Many years ago.
Oh.
So I don't know.
I'm sorry.
You know, and I thought back then it would be amazing to bring a film here. So it's great to be here for the first time and to share in the space and with your audience. So Under the Hanging Tree is a film that started sort of 2018 as a response to me in Namibia as a Namibian and as a Herero, wanting to make a film that dealt with some of the legacies of our colonial history and the legacies of the Herero genocide in Namibia. And I felt very much it would be interesting to try and play with genre and to try and subvert it a little bit. And so there's a lot of sort of slow cinema techniques and sort of things that would have influenced me, particularly from West African filmmakers or African filmmakers on the continent. So trying to show ritual, trying to show, center other things beyond the narrative. But I also thought it would be interesting to develop a sort of detective or something that at least appeared to be playing with genre on the surface. Because we are diggers, we are digging into the past, trying to uncover history ourselves, bits about ourselves. So it felt like the most appropriate vehicle or way into exploring some of these themes.
Well, what about, can you speak a little bit about tree and metaphor and its symbolic context into the Horeo area?
Absolutely. The tree was inspired by a real tree, which we actually see in an archive image in the film, in our early scene when she's flicking through slides with the projector. But my interest actually in this film and this history started with looking at my history and where we come from. And in Herero culture, we have a myth where we say we were born out of the tree, born out of the roots of the tree with the cattle. At the same time, we have a very close kind of symbiotic relationship with cattle. Quite like the Maasai. The Maasai say they fell from the sky with the cows. We say we came up out of the ground with the cows. So I'm not sure which one of us is telling the truth. But then at the same time, and it's a very specific tree, a leadwood tree, which is a certain type of tree. And it's the same tree that they hung us from. So I was always trying to, think how does one deal with these extremities of you return to the source, you explore your history, where you come from, and the tree where you came from is both a reminder of death as well as birth and creation. So I wanted to resolve that. I was interested in those tensions and then exploring the tree in a contemporary space. And it's also a way of kind of confronting and reclaiming history and some of the colonial archive. We grew up with these images terrorizing us, very much like these images of hanging trees in the United States, I believe, right? And it's why I wanted the film to very much be centered around a young or youngish person kind of moving through these spaces, both now and the past and somewhere in between. Right? It's very atmospheric, but to center us, the individual, making sense of these dualities and these histories. Yeah.
And how about the landscape? You seem to like the cinematographic depiction of the landscape and the human beings moving in and out of that landscape. Is there a metaphor like the tree that we're supposed to get that is very local contextually, or again, can you speak a little bit about that? Because I was very impressed at the photographic representation of Namibia, or at least the area you filmed, in the tree idea. There's this like a horizontalness, and there's this vertical energy in trees, and human beings even are vertical to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of the chapter headings, there's a proverb, trees do not meet, but people do. Trees are like, I think, these sort of antennae, these anchors of energy, but, sort of reaching towards the heavens, but they don't meet. And I think you're right, people operate in a similar way, but we do meet. And it's only through Christina, our police officer, that we're able to connect. So she helps us connect, but then also this thing of time traveling, I think. I think the tree is a portal of sorts. And there's somebody who had a very interesting reading on the film, felt that what if maybe the whole thing is just a dream? And, with the last line, what if we're dead already, which is actually meant to be a lot more optimistic than it sounds. I know it's quite a difficult film to say the least, but it's not meant to end on a pessimistic note. But yes, so maybe it's even just a dream, and she's time traveling through the tree.
And the talent, the acting is so impressive. Namibian cinema is so young, and the kind of performance you got out of your actor, your talent. Can you again speak in the context of performance, in the I guess no more maybe newly, but a very newly independent country like the fact that cinema is young also where you are.
It's very young, and we speak of a film community rather than an industry. Namibia is 34 years old as a country. We've had a film commission for about 20 years. For a country of our size, we're not doing too badly, being able to make films. But ultimately, we don't really know what Namibian cinema is, which I think is a good thing. And there's a lot of experimentation that was taking place here, maybe, I think, because we're not, I do try to reiterate this at home and when I've been teaching in the past, is that we have the opportunity to become anything. There is the influences from other parts of the continent, from commercial types of filmmaking or more socially conscious types of filmmaking, from America, from Asia, so Bollywood. So I hope that Namibians will take that to heart, will play a little bit. I think at the moment, we're very hyper commercial in our responses because that's the diet that most people have. I'm been privileged to study film a bit and to have a larger diet, if you will, or greater sort of influences. And it's still a very young industry. The actors were incredible in this film, I thought, as well. And this went on to be our first official submission to the Oscars in the Best International Feature. category. So that's still sort of a new thing for us. Thank you.
A little bit more about the sister. She's so photogenic and I mean, like,
Yeah.
can you speak a little bit
Gurli,
about her?
Gurli Jadama, she's an incredible actress. She's a friend as well. And she's taken, I think, audiences by storm over the last few years. She's really firmly established herself as one of the top actresses, not just in Namibia, but I think around the region. She's just done a film now in Cyprus with sort of a big European co-production film. And interestingly enough, she did a film at the same time that we did this called The Measures of Men, which was a big German production, actually, centered around a German scientist, so kind of from that perspective. But a film that was actually set during the war. So you see the kind of reenactment of the genocide, of the battle. And it's a film that also got a lot of criticism because of some of those things and because of the sort of perspective of the filmmakers. But it's quite interesting that Gurli has been in both these films. And she's like very different films, very different budgets, very different perspectives, and had to play characters wrestling with this history. So it's quite, and again, for Namibians, these are the first beginnings of us having any control or centering or influence in telling our own stories, to, you know, put that cliche. So it's very new, it's very young, it's very fresh. She, like me, we discovered things about our families we didn't know. We knew that our families were directly experienced the genocide in Namibia, but nobody knows how to talk about it. And it's only now that you start making films that things come up, conversations happen in families, even our screenings to have people in the cinema to bring together multiple generations. And a lot of the elders were saying, we don't know how to talk about these things. We don't know how to talk about the trauma, but we also don't know how to talk about the holy fire or the trees or the sacred cattle or these things that are very important in rural culture but are difficult to talk about. So it's really the beginning, I hope, of doing just that.
And also fire, the metaphor of fire. What is the specific context in Namibia?
Well, it's just the Herero. We have, we call it the holy fire, and it's the most important of totems, if you will. And in rituals, like the fire has to be burning all the time. But we also understand it to be the burning bush of Moses. So there's also this link with us to those histories and stories. The Herero are very strange as well. I don't know, there are myths about, when you get into these ideas around the lost tribes and things. So a lot of things about the Herero community that don't make sense. We have a lot of crazy mythology, and there's a story about us coming from an island on the Indian Ocean that sunk and then traveling up the Red Sea and down into Egypt and North and East Africa and then later to Namibia. Things like circumcision and other things that are practiced make people wonder whether there are these linkages, and the fact that there are certain people that all over the world get genocided, like in quite mysterious, unique ways. Why certain people are picked on, in a way, and you wonder what that's about. But yes, the fire. So there's this idea like the Roman fires, like they have to be burning all the time to keep this link with this world and the other world intact. So that's why we start the movie with the fire. It wasn't linear, wasn't quite right chronologically, but there was an intention to start. And I know the takes are very long and quite deliberately so, but that was intentionally challenging what you expect from the structure of a film, to start with it's just a guy under a tree doing a ritual, cursing, praying, and that's also deliberately why we bring in fire at key points. So there's the German lady Eva Fischer, the farm owner, sitting by the fire, And there are other things that hint throughout the film at this kind of capturing of also the spirit and the spirituality of the people and of the land, not just sort of material things. And then I think also when they're bearing their souls at the fire, Christina and her police partner Hosea talk about their past. They talk about, she mentions her mother, he talks about his past difficulties with alcoholism. So it's almost like the fire brings out their innermost. They end up sharing their struggles.
In terms of, I just want to take you back to the tree and the idea of plant in the Xhosa, the Xhosa mythology of being born or coming out of the grass water. And the Khoi Khoi, is there any relationship with Khoi Khois and Horevos?
Not so much that I'm aware of, in the sense that there is, but only later, I think, with conflict. The Herero fight a lot with the Nama people. The Nama is another name for, because as the Khoi start to mix, they're also given different names at different times, which we pushed back on, and then reverted back to the names again, similar with the use of Bushman versus San. But as those people start to mix in the Cape, and Cape Town and the Cape of South Africa is sort of the center of the colonial empire in the region, if you will. So they push up into southern Namibia. And the Herero at the time were dominating the central parts of Namibia and the best grazing lands for their cattle. So a lot of those communities came up into Namibia and they were like cowboys. A lot of this history is not really acknowledged, but like some of these first formidable groups in Namibia that really dominate the entire country, or most of it, come from the Cape and are a mixture of Khoi and European settlers and other ethnic groups from the region. But it's the Herero are not so much like what you're saying, like the Xhosa and even the Zulu to an extent that had some sort of mixing and intermingling with the Khoi tribes, right? And they even pick up the click base, the clicks in their languages. In Herero, we don't have that.
And the mythology of the cattle.
Yeah.
It's almost this, kind of, maybe it travels together with what you were just addressing, because the Xhosa's, devotion to the cattle, on almost a spiritual level. It sounds that is also a sacred kind of being.
Absolutely. And we were born with the cow, you get buried with the cow. So ideally, when you have an old traditional grave, they would stack the skulls, the carcasses, or just the skulls and antlers, horns of the cows in the tree, which we see a little bit in some of the archive images. And then the idea is that our bad guys in the film have a kind of perverted mysticism, so they're doing something similar and ritualistically, but with bad intent, if you will. Yeah.
Well, before I pass it, just one more question. Language, was the gentleman, the other policeman, was he mixing German and Horero?
He was mixing Afrikaans, which is like Dutch sort of, and Khoi Khoi Koab, or Nama Damara, which is the click-based language.
What was the white lady talking? The same?
German.
German. Okay. I felt there was some German going on.
Yes.
Okay. Let me pass it. Where's the mic guy? What is wrong with people today? Okay, brother. Now we have Bob Marley passing the mics. Could you give it to sister? No, in the back there. Up there. Oh, thank you, brother. That's Gizao. He's a cinematographer and artist from Ethiopia. And when he passes the mic, make sure you don't smoke it.
Thank you very much for the film. I am, ek is deur mekaar. Ek is baie deur mekaar, sorry fucked up.
Dis baie jammer.
I think that there's so many levels and layers in this film that I know I'm going to be thinking about tonight, and just to come in as a Xhosa person and the cattle. So I didn't expect to kind of have these resonances in the film. I wanted to come in pretty blind to the film, so I didn't, have other people's reviews. And then there was the language, all these different languages, and I could pick up some of the Herero, Omuti, and stuff like that. But the thing that, okay, there was a point that nearly left my body when she said, the German woman, imagine what we could do with your body and my mind. So it was like Get Out. It's like they've always been the original abductors of our bodies and our minds, right? But they're also, and the colonizers who are still there in South African, in that way. So also, I was very excited with how you allowed yourself to fucks with history in a way that South African cinema, Black filmmakers, are still kind of burdened by the tell it like it was, and it's like the apartheid, histories, and there's no genre bending or exploration, or there hasn't been, or I don't know, maybe they've suffered the vagaries of funding. So it was very, I think someone like Jamil X Kubeka is someone who's been able to do that, and how he interrogates certain histories. So it was very exciting for me as a storyteller, and as a historian, as a Xhosa person, and just with the levels of dispossession, and the spiritual colonization, the land as a character, as an ecological ancestor, which has borne witness and held all of these terrible occurrences. But thank you very much. I probably will not sleep tonight because I know it's some of you thinking, bye, donkey.
Anybody else?
Not to be too obvious, but I was curious as to why you chose what you were trying to tell us about the detective in the opening scene of her having sex, which comes, of course, right after the fire. What was going on?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think it was my editor who insisted that we cut it that way. No, well, I think the idea was to, I'm not gonna lie, to shock a little bit in the beginning. And I always felt it interesting to ground whoever our main character was going to be in that world of classic genre, what you expect from a cop film or a crime film, a noir, Nordic noir, where Scandinavians started flipping things and having it be mostly a female detective rather than a male detective. And that's generally the rules of that world. Is generally the cop has their own problems and shadows and is doing everything they can to not deal with them, and that usually means drink and casual sex and lack of connectivity with the world or themselves or the people around them. So the idea was to thrust us into that like almost immediately, and coming out of the kind of the hint of nightmare or shadows or terror with the opening score, and even the opening sort of fire and cursing at the beginning. So very much that, and then you sort of slowly come out of it into this slow pace of the sort of overly exposed, very bright Namibian sun. So for effect, because it was not shot that way, and in the edit rooms when we sort of found that, and it sort of seemed to make sense. And I've always been in two minds about whether to have gone the route of the electric guitar and all that terror at the beginning, because initially the idea was to have things very, very gentle and like kind of lull you to sleep, and then only go crazy right at the end with the 360 and the crazy German lady. But yeah, we decided in the edit room to play really at the beginning, and which I've never been quite sure about, but it does keep you on your toes, on the edge of your seat, because after that you're like, oh, I don't trust this film at all. I know something's gonna come out of nowhere again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to kind of piggyback off of that, and you mentioned like tension and duality. I found myself really trying to navigate this sense of grief, but hopefulness, and this sense of like eternity and vastness, but also this deep sense of darkness and challenge. So I just was curious if you could speak to that, or to your approach to these dualities. I find myself kind of teetering between these different spaces and not quite sure, as you were talking about, like, which way is this going? But also trying to maybe reconcile both of them simultaneously.
No, thank you. I think I'm motivated by this thing of like dread. Like that's what's actually driving all things is dread. And also from my perspective as a kind of city kid, a lot of my peers, we grew up like city kids in Namibia, can't speak our languages properly, don't go to the village or the place where our ancestral sort of larger family come from. So there's disconnect. So you're not really sure, are we going home? Are we going forward? Are we going backwards? Is it the stuff about colonialism again, or is it the stuff about tree mythology and like cool stuff, or like what are we doing? So I wanted to communicate that a little bit, I think, in the film and in the style. There's a sense of just disconnect and dread. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, before we continue. No, I'm good. Okay. Yeah. Okay, everyone else, go ahead.
Sorry, I was so busy reading. I forgot to ask my question. The look and feel of the film, I mean, you've answered some of the stuff in terms of like the genres. I wanted to find out if you went immediately to Nordic noir, or sort of made different assessments, and then because the lights and how harsh it was, how when you said that it wasn't shot like that it kind of came up later in the edit, if you can speak a bit to that.
Sure. It wasn't shot in sequence.
Okay.
I mean, let me get this right. It wasn't intended in the script and in how we shot to start with the fire under the tree, and then to go to the sex scene. There was a lot more that we shot of setting her up in the city beforehand, which didn't quite work for different reasons. So we get into the village, into the rural areas very quickly. And in terms of the style, it was kind of like, wanting to do the inverse of that Nordic noir, like play with, instead of the snow, it's desert, or it's sunny desert, and the brightness, to play with sort of light. And Namibia feels it's very hot, it's very bright. So things do feel kind of like blown out, overexposed. And things are very slow there. It's a very small, slow-paced place. So people talk slowly, things move slowly. And so that's also why the style is trying to accentuate that. And then also just the influence of films like Yelin from Suleiman Cissé, and a lot of early African cinema where there was this genre they kind of started called Return to the Source. And this idea of centering African mythical customs. So that's why this idea, right, of just showing a scene of somebody doing a ritual by a fire, which is like, wait, what is this? We're used to wide shot, medium shot, close up, over the shoulder. You know, we're used to being given all the information in most films, and you don't know what to make of it. So I like that. I wanted to do that purposefully. Transcendental style films that deliberately have long takes, where you start to watch other things in the frame, right? And you realize it's not like a Hollywood film where everything is explained and you lean back. You actually kind of need to lean in and look like, okay, what is actually going on? What is the point of this? And yeah, it was in search of a new language also, in search of a new cinema language. I don't think we've quite got there, but it was an attempt, a step towards that. I think like what you're saying, they're not enough maybe films in Namibia and South Africa coming out that play a bit, and we're trying to find like a new language to get at things that we can't really talk about, right? And I think you're right, Jamil Tubeka, he's a friend as well. He makes very interesting films, and they're difficult, but he plays with the form. Like he really, yeah. Thank you.
I like the way you described the leaning in versus the leaning back, and that's definitely what I was doing without realizing it. What I'm really curious about is her son. So she said he was in a city. At first I thought he passed away, and then when the white woman set herself on fire, behind her looked like there was a boy, and then she called out her son's name. What was that about?
Good question. There was initially the film was written like really traditionally 3-act structure, and as I mentioned, we weren't going to start. We changed what we start with, so that story was more developed, where it was clear and all those questions were answered around what's happening. Okay, yes, she has a son who's back in the city. She's a bit disconnected from him. It's not in his life quite at the moment, and so all that was threaded throughout the story, and then there was suggestions that this woman on the farm was doing terrible things to children, and that was all clear and resolved in what we ended up shooting, and things not quite working or happy accidents, etc. And then in the edit, that changed, so now it's all sort of hinted at, and it's not very clear intentionally, and so it's more like missingness and absence, and that the child represents, and maybe it's her child now, maybe it's a child that she lost. I can't answer that. I mean, we're deliberately not answering it, and that is to also, it's a bit of a metaphor for the missingness of the ancestors in a way, and just the unexplained and loss.
Anybody else? In the front here.
I have some questions. I'm very critical of Black films because we need heroes and we are stereotyped. And young people imitate all these negative things that they see in cinema. So, as you talk about the film industry at home being so new, it's a great opportunity to correct some of those things. And in doing so, I cringed when I saw the sex scene, and I thought, you bring a family and children, that's not what you want them to start seeing. I kept looking for a hero, and when you talk about it was not really known what the child, the mother having a child and her relationship and what happened to him. I thought he ended up being sacrificed. And that was another traumatic thing. And so I'm appealing to you as a filmmaker to hopefully be setting a positive example to make sure that you put in some of this positive that we're so hungry for. I'd like to make a suggestion. One thing that most of the world doesn't know about Africa is our lives before colonialism. And we do still have enough history to try to use our creativity to imagine what it was like, what it would be like today if we weren't assaulted. And those are things that I think should and could be incorporated into film to make it exciting and make us feel good about watching a film.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the comment, and I tried to do that. I agree with you that we do need inspirational stories, that we do need heroes that we can look to. Thank you for that.
My question is about the scene between her and her partner after she kind of came out of the sand. I was really moved by that scene for whatever reason. I'm gonna have to unpack that, but it just felt very like she was being cleansed. It was like a redemption sort of scene, and then he sort of plays with the scripture where Jesus says, "I lay my life down willingly; no one takes it from me." But he said something along the lines of, "I confess my sins." So I was just curious about that scene and the meaning that you wanted audiences to make of that.
Thank you. It's a good question. I mean, the idea was that it was a cleansing. Initially, I wanted to shoot a baptism kind of sequence where she comes out of water, but it's these two traditional era women dunking her, and it's kind of her returning to self. We didn't have the budget for that, so we just had him washing her after she, come out of the ground, like you're saying. But yes, it was meant to be a death and rebirth. And that's where we got back to sort of classic storytelling, Hollywood storytelling. Minute 75, all is lost. In every movie, somebody dies at minute 75. If they don't die, somebody else dies, or there's a symbolism of death, and then there's rebirth. And the old, I do appreciate that old school script structure, actually, because I think it predates Hollywood, it predates Western cinema, if you will. It's very similar to the tarot and mystery traditions from North Africa and Egypt and other places. But you have, in that storytelling, it's like I think the essence of it, right, is that the hero has a wound, and they won't address their wound, and they go off fighting, trying to fight the bad guys, and they get so far, 2/3 of their way into the story, and then things don't work out anymore, and part of them has to die, and they have to heal that wound, their unconscious part of themselves. And then once they are reborn with the fusing of the unconscious mind that is now healed, that is now informing the conscious mind with wholeness, they are holy, rather than being led by the wound. Now the hero is able to fight the bad guy, and that's what usually happens in movies, right? And now then they go and they regroup with their team, and they fight again, and they have the big climax at the end of the film, and now the hero is able to win because they're a new person. It's very spiritual filmmaking. I think that's why we connect so deeply to it, and why, as much as we've had more freedom maybe in storytelling and TV in the last, however, maybe decade, I think there's something sacred about that 90 minutes, 2 hours or so. Just that amount of time going one journey with one person. So it's a long answer, sorry. it was absolutely about purification and rebirth, and there's a lot of Christian mysticism and Herero mysticism threaded throughout the film deliberately, and some of it's very overt, some of it's not. I mean, she's named Christina for a reason, and I think that's also part of the idea of one person going on this journey of searching and finding, and so that's also why we deliberately went with those quotes about the Good Shepherd. And because the realization, it's he's being a shepherd, he's being a protector, sure, but she is about to become the Good Shepherd. What if we're dead already? The movie ends with she has stepped into that role of being the protector, the shepherd, a cop for real, rather than being led by her wound. And that's why it's the quote from the book of John. That's why it's about I laid down my life by my own will. I am no longer, just a shepherd for a flock because it's my job, and because I'm pissed off with the world, which she is, and she probably has a right to be. But now I am no longer mine. I am in service of something higher. I am protecting and working with the flock as the shepherd because I want to. So it's hinting at that sort of shift in consciousness.
Anyone else? One, two, I'm kidding. That's it? I think everybody wants to go home or something. This is like, this is pretty good. Yeah. Well, I know, oh, go ahead, sister. Yeah, you saved me.
Yeah, colonizer.
Yeah.
Colonizing discussion.
Go ahead, sister.
There's something very interesting that you said, because I was going to ask the question of how is the genocide spoken about, remembered, and back to Date Garima's comment about the Xhosa and the mysticism. So you had the Loma and all the cattle were killed and the people, so it was a kind of forced killing, supposedly, according to the colonizers who tell that story. When you say it's not spoken about, but they are, I would presume, people who are your grandparents' age, if you could just take us through how, I know it was in the late 1800s and it's not spoken about, you said. So I found that very interesting. It was a question that I wanted to ask, and then you mentioned that. When did you come into growing up a sense of there's this thing?
It is spoken about, but with limits, and there are ongoing negotiations for reparations actually happening, which you might want to know. And they've sort of hit a deadlock or a roadblock. And I've grown up aware of it, different levels of awareness, I suppose. You're right, it's sort of 4 generations removed. For me, it's a lot closer because my dad was quite old when he had me. He was in his 40s, but my dad was then raised by his great aunt, not his mother. And his great aunt was in the war, and she was shot, and she was injured. So he grew up with first-hand stories of her experience of the war, which we grew up with. And that village where my father's family come from is one of the key sites of the battle, one of the early battles. We've now turned there's a mission station there where people sought refuge back in the day, which has now been turned into a German-run guest farm. The owner of, not the guest farm, he's quite nice. We run a film lab, which we just started this year in Namibia, called Return to the Source. But the owner of that farm who's a bit absent and comes every few weeks, is a real nasty drunk and racist, and he comes in with his gun and he tries to attack black patrons should he find them, and he terrorizes the staff that work there. Who it's on a farm, so it's very rural. It's like in the middle of the American South. Might be like if that's an appropriate comparator. So it's like you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't have protection if you have that kind of situation. So that's still the reality, and that's an area where we have relatives buried, but we can't maintain the graves. We can't visit the graves because you need permission. It's private land. And there's a nasty guy like this. I thought it was a joke. We were running this film lab, and the staff were terrified every day. They were like, you know, like, you city guys, don't you know where we are? It's like, it was like something out of a movie. And we're being told there was this figure who was going to show up at any moment. And I was like, what? Of course, we're from the city. So, oh, where is he? Oh, I hope he does. Like, we don't need that. But just, it's such a crazy reality that, that there are still weirdos like that, you know, who terrorize people, but it's the truth. So I'm still discovering, like that was a recent experience. I was like, oh, why can't we go and see Uncle so-and-so's graves or maintain them? And then people say, you know, the German graves are really well kept after, but the Herero graves and other graves are not. It's like, well, because we're not even like allowed on some of these farms. So there's still these real issues, if you will. But we do talk about it, we do know about it, but it's like there are levels, I think, if that makes sense, of awareness. And then we grow up with I keep saying city, not kid, but city consciousness. So people are consumed by other things. And this history, these memories seem like another planet. Or people also, well, why must we talk about it? How is that going to help me? I showed this film in that village of my family that I'm talking about under a tree like a few months ago. And, you know, it was a great experience for me. But at the end, like, they weren't asking these really interesting questions like you guys. Or nobody was going to ask me about, like, your cinematic influences. They were just like, hey, do you film events? Can you come film one of ours? How much do you charge? It's like, you know, something, you know, which is always interesting, because then I go to these academic spaces and everybody's like, oh my God, genocide. Oh my God, tell us more, tell us more. But when you go to the community, they're like, you know, like, we don't, why would we want to talk about this? What? Like, we're not interested in your art film. We want, can you cover an event for us? You know, that's like, because you know, like, contemporary daily lives for most people in Namibia, South Africa, and other parts, it's a luxury. History, to dwell, to study, to look at this. It's become very politicized. So there are, I think, people are calling for reparations, or they're calling for radical solutions or action, right? In some spaces. But there isn't really a sort of, I think that's why I say it's the beginning of us trying to curate the conversation, right? Or guide it, shepherd it a little bit.
Well,
Thank you.
I would say a little bit here to you, since we're gonna close it, unless you have a burning question. I just want to say, I think still, you know, I would say this in terms of, like, for example, when we did Sankofa here in the United States, nobody wanted to see a movie on slavery because the tradition of the treatment, the narrative treatment of slavery has turned off Black people bad. And so I'll tell you a good example of community rising to occasion when you implicate them in the story. I think in the South Africa and Namibia, you guys, especially the young ones, you have a whole homework because those people, you have to go deeper why they didn't connect. Because film school, film festivals, that's one thing. This audience is even one thing. But I think when you implicate Africans in the narrative structure of the film, they have no exit and they begin to take over the film. So there was a woman when Sankofa opened in Baltimore. It started in DC, and it's Black people who opened it in the theater. We didn't have money to even open it, and the distribution companies refused to show the film regardless of what we did in different festivals. And so the best example is a woman, a bus driver in Baltimore, saw the film, and she said, "There's this film that you folks," and at that time, black theaters are closed in the black community, and you have to go into the suburban white area really to see films. Inner city theaters were all gone. Baldwin Hill Theater, which I at UCLA knew, gone at the time we got there with our film. And so this bus driver woman was telling black folks in the bus, "You got to check out this film called Sankofa, something like that." And another sister said, "What is it about?" And the woman said, "Slavery." And she said, "Damn depression. I don't want to see no goddamn slavery movies," is what the discussion was. But the bus driver says, "No, this is something different. It's something different. You got to check it out." So a black woman came out of that bus to see the movie in Westview. And it's a long story, but I'm going to shorten it. So she saw the film a few times, again and again and again. And at that time, something we picked up from Spike Lee was selling merchandise, hats and things and etc. And we were in the lobby, our people were in the lobby, and they see this woman coming out of the theater always and waiting. And they ask her, "Is there any problem you want to go see? You have a problem with the film?" "No, I'm waiting for my people." And what basically the story goes, once she saw the movie and went back and again, she rented a van and brought 12 people every night who could not make it to the theater. So for me, I would say, however imperfect our film was, we touched black people. I always say, my payment was black people hugging me and crying. And I know where that origin is the hunger, etc. So to me, I think South Africa and Namibia, we expect more from you guys, because you guys are in a landscape that a whole lot of things, even the Xhosa thing we were talking, is the most powerful story of that is not told yet. And it has a lot to do with the elite in Africa, its priority in film commission or film, etc. South Africa bores me to death. I haven't been to your area because they do not want to deal with the African story. They want to be popular in festivals. They want to impress white people. They do not want to alienate white people. All of us are human beings. That theme. I've gone 17 times and did a whole lot of training there. I will never step foot again after I made TESA at all, because the elite is building something corrupt South Africa, and true filmmakers are not wanted there. And I see a lot of young people who are oppressed in South Africa. And I hope that you guys will really grab this line that is waiting to usher itself through our camera into our people. And I have that hope because I see this energy. I have hope from you. And I don't know what the other brothers are doing, sisters are doing, but to me, this is a good start. Now, the other thing I want to say is this. Black people empowered us to have this place. If you saw Sankofa, this is what you made us buy, this building. And it is in this building we're going next door, fighting gentrification every day to stay here. And DC folks know what's happening with gentrification. But our battle is really to build audiences bit by bit, contractual discourse, where we create not necessarily taking Hollywood's audience, but building our own audience within our own cultural temperament and narrative temperament. This is what my wife and me live for, and that segues me to the fundraising we're doing for the building. You gotta support us. Number two, we just did yesterday a thing called Sudan in our mind. the sister was standing there who actually did a very powerful, with her sister, they did a powerful film showing discussion. Please come, be part of that. And then we have every other week, we have Congo in our mind, Haiti in our mind, especially Haiti with this Kenyan fool sending Kenyan soldiers in Haiti. Let's not be behind the discourse. Let's grab it ourselves. Let's not wait NPR and white folks to give us. Let's grab the goddamn news and then interpret it to our community. Black people should know that Kenyans might go with body bags back to Kenya without knowing Haitian, without knowing diaspora, without knowing our relationship, Africa's continent relationship to our descendants, our offsprings here. We are meddling. So be ready and let's grab the topic. The other one is Gaza on Our Mind. Yeah, and then we're showing a film you cannot miss, a film called Sterling Brown, After Winter, Sterling Brown. Even if you have seen it, you have to see it again because Amira Baraka was a student of Sterling Brown. So there's an interview first we show of him talking about Sterling Brown. Hopefully also Ackland Lynch talking about Sterling Brown. This is a very progressive poet who is beyond the Harlem Renaissance, who just came out of the Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina ground. And he's one poet for me, revolutionary, who actually in his poetry, you see ordinary Black people just manifest onto your face. There's not poetry like that. It's not blues. It's not feel sorry for me. It's Black people just resurrecting themselves and say, no, I'm not what you think you are. It's a very powerful poet. I hope you come and see that film and be part of that discussion. Did I forget anything? It was supposed to be your job.
That's true. On December 14, we're going to be having a children's book fair. So if you have children, grandchildren, sisters, brothers, you can bring them here, and we would have plenty of books for children. We are known to have the largest Black children book collection in Washington, D.C.
The
So
largest would sound like Donald Trump, so it's not, size is not important.
okay. And after that, on December 18, we're going to have a film screening, Wilmington 10. It's made by Gashaile Garima. And we would have a discussion about the importance of archives with his wife and co-owner of Sankofa, Shiri Garima, and fellow archive owners. And on December 21st, we're going to have a musical performance by Free Benjamin and Ayana Gregory, who is a daughter of Dick Gregory, Baba Dick Gregory,
Right here,
right there on our wall.
our spiritual father.
And on December 22nd, 11 a.m., we're going to be having, if you are interested in traditional clothing, African clothing, like Kente clothing, we're going to be having a workshop for a Kente clothing workshop. We're going to have it upstairs in the conference room. There would be a $40 entrance fee, and it would start on 11 a.m. and last until 2 p.m. And the last one would be David White and H Theory. It's going to be on December 25th. Please come and enjoy our events. If you want to know more about the events, you can go to sankofa.com/Sankofa events, or you can follow us on IG, Instagram, Twitter, Sankofa DC.
Yeah, and David White is the composer of many films, including Sankofa. He composed the music for the film. So he's been doing jazz every other Friday here. But now, when is it?
On the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Thank you.
again, thank you for coming. You have more?
No, that's all.
Thank you for coming. If we don't give the air of gratefulness because we expect folks to come, confront us to do better, make us improved filmmakers, critically debate with us, and therefore we might not sound grateful, but we are grateful. You dare to walk in here without without big publicity, etc. Again, my brother, thank you for blessing us with your presence. And I hope you will stay for a beer with not your audience, but you, if you want. Thank you again for coming. Take care, folks. Oh, yeah. In terms of what he was talking about, I mean, the archive issue, I want especially the community people to know that in the archive he was talking about, we're trying to build our own archive. This archive is like we have the last interview of Morris Bishop of Grenada before he died. We have Thomas Sankara interview. We have Asada Shikura before she broke out of prison. These are things we don't want nobody to get hold of and have our own archive. So we gotta really know what's going on with this archiving. I am presently doing a 5-chapter documentary on the Italian-Ethiopian War of 1935. And you cannot imagine the monopoly of these documentary footages, how much it costs to buy them, etc. But we are trying to use this film when it premieres and wherever it shows to fight about how African and non-white people have the right to access this documentary footage. Our ancestors fighting with Europeans and against Europeans is filmed and owned. You know, we have to be very concerned about, we can't just have filmmakers. We gotta know our own children when they make movies and they want to use the archive of Zora or somebody, they have to go back to the master to beg and buy. This is what happened to me 20, 30 years now doing this movie. And so it's very important you guys know there is a struggle of in archiving of memory. To some extent, on the art level, including the returning of the Holocaust issue in the Namibian issue, there's a whole activism going on we should be aware of. But oftentimes, we do not battle to own our ancestors' spiritual image, even fighting with them or against them. When the Germans and the Italians were conquered by the new superpowers, Hitler and Mussolini, whatever you're told they are, they're the most brilliant Europeans at that time. They had documented everything cinematically, constructed streets. Italy still lives in the streets Mussolini built. Now, what I'm bringing up this is the superpowers, US, France, and England, made copy of everything of the vanquished countries, like German footages, film footages I'm talking about. Made copies and took them into their own archive and peddled them. And this kind of battle for image of our history, you got to be involved. You can't just say, I'm not a filmmaker. No, your daughter might end up being a filmmaker. She might want to get your image that Getty owns. And it's very important that you enter into that battle. Sorry, I was not expecting to moderate this situation. This guy was supposed to do it. But we're trying to empower young people to do it right. And thank you for coming again. I hope you will stay and talk with the filmmaker. I will not promise to buy you a beer. The film I'm making is kicking my ass, my behind. Sorry, sister, correction. Because you're right. I raised 6 kids. Okay, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.